Behind Journey's biggest hits, behind the spotlight and the heartbreak, Steve Perry carried something far more personal. A secret love, and a daughter no one knew existed. Let's uncover the truth behind rock's most mysterious man. The rise of a legend and the silence that followed. In the late 1970s, rock music was in transition. Disco was fading, punk was roaring, and the world was craving a voice that could make people feel again. That voice was Steve Perry. When Journey added him in 1977, everything changed overnight. Suddenly, their sound wasn't just technical, it was emotional. Perry's soaring tenor could lift a stadium to tears, and songs like Lights and Wheel in the Sky turned into anthems that never aged. But it was Don't Stop Believin' that sealed his place in rock history. The moment that opening piano line hit and his voice came in, just a small town girl, it felt like he wasn't just singing lyrics. He was telling our story. By the mid-80s, Perry was untouchable. Journey was selling out arenas, dominating MTV, and topping charts across the world. Yet, behind the fame, there was a quiet unease. Perry didn't crave celebrity. He craved connection. He once admitted that he was never fully comfortable with fame, calling it a strange kind of loneliness you can't explain. After Journey's massive Raised on Radio tour, in 1987, he vanished. No farewell concert, no goodbye statement, just silence. For nearly a decade, no one knew where Steve Perry went. Some said he was recovering from exhaustion. Others whispered about heartbreak, betrayal, or even tragedy. But those closest to him hinted at something deeper. They said he was retreating, not because of fame, but because of something private, something personal that he didn't want the world to dissect. When he finally resurfaced in the mid-1990s for a brief solo return, the world saw a man changed, softer, distant, almost haunted. The fire was still there, but behind his eyes was something that never got explained. Maybe it was grief, maybe guilt, or maybe it was the weight of a secret, one that had followed him quietly through the years. And as fans celebrated the legend he became, few realized that his greatest song wasn't about stardom. It was about everything he couldn't say. The rumor that wouldn't die. When Steve Perry walked away from fame, fans assumed he'd simply had enough of the spotlight. But the longer he stayed silent, the more people began to wonder, what was he really hiding? That's when whispers of a secret daughter began to surface. It started small. A few fans on early internet forums in the late 90s claimed Perry had a child he never spoke about. The story kept resurfacing, always slightly different, yet strangely consistent. The supposed daughter's name was sometimes Shamila Arnold, other times just Shamila Perry. But one detail never changed. She was said to be the daughter he loved deeply, yet deliberately protected from the world. At first, most dismissed it as fan fiction. After all, Perry was one of rock's most private figures. He rarely gave interviews, avoided social media completely, and never discussed his family. But then came the interview that changed everything. In one rare conversation years later, a journalist asked him directly about the rumor. Perry paused. He didn't laugh it off. He didn't deny it. Instead, he said softly, "I do have a child, but in the essence of protecting her, I kinda don't want to get into that." That single line sent the fandom into overdrive, because in the world of Steve Perry, silence was never accidental. Every word he spoke carried meaning, and that one sounded like confirmation. The press tried to follow up, but Perry never expanded on it again. There were no public photos, no acknowledgments, no interviews from family or friends. It was as if his personal life had been locked behind the same guarded voice that once broke millions of hearts. Still, fans couldn't help connecting the dots. Some believed Oh Sherry, his 1984 hit, wasn't just a love song, but a farewell message to more than one person. Others pointed to lyrics from his later solo work that seemed to carry hidden references to a child left behind or a promise kept in silence. Maybe it was just a coincidence, or maybe Perry had been speaking through his music all along. Either way, the rumor refused to die. It followed him from decade to decade, a ghost story wrapped in melody. And if the rumor was true, then the biggest mystery wasn't who the daughter was. It was why he kept her hidden for so long. The hidden romance and the timeline that doesn't add up. To understand the truth behind Steve Perry's mysterious daughter, we have to look not at what he said, but what he didn't say. Because throughout his career, Steve was a master at saying everything through emotion and nothing through words. He poured heartbreak into the lyrics, but never told you whose heart it was. He wrote about love lost, but never named who he lost. And somewhere between those lines, the story of his secret romance began to form. Those close to Perry during his early days described him as passionate, romantic, but guarded. A man who felt everything deeply, but revealed almost nothing. He once admitted that he grew up lonely and music became his only safe space. "I didn't have anyone to talk to," he said, "so I sang it out instead." If you trace back his timeline, you find strange gaps, months or even years when he vanished completely from the public eye. Some believe that during one of those quiet stretches, possibly in the early 1980s, Perry fell in love with a woman outside the music industry. Someone who wasn't interested in fame or publicity. Someone who saw the man, not the rock star. That relationship, as the rumors suggest, might have led to the birth of his daughter. If that's true, it would explain a lot. Perry's protective nature, his abrupt decision to leave touring behind, and even his refusal to confirm anything decades later. But the timeline doesn't quite line up perfectly. And that's what makes the story so haunting. Some fans point to the late 1970s, before Journey's mainstream breakthrough, when Perry was still chasing his dream. Others believe the child came later, after Journey's world domination, when the chaos of fame made a normal life impossible. Either way, one thing is consistent. Perry was never the kind of man to exploit his personal life for attention. In a world where rock stars flaunted everything, he chose to hide the one thing that mattered most. Maybe he wasn't ashamed, maybe he was protecting her from the same spotlight that nearly destroyed him. And as the years passed, the silence around that part of his life only deepened the mystery, until love, heartbreak, and family became the three chords that defined Steve Perry's hidden story. Sherry, Kelly, and the loves that shaped him. When fans talk about Steve Perry's love life, one name always echoes through the years: Sherry Swafford. In the mid-80s, Sherry wasn't just his girlfriend, she was his muse. The music video for "Oh Sherry" made her immortal, showing the world a softer side of the rock idol who had built his career on power ballads and emotional intensity. But behind the chemistry on camera was a relationship under impossible pressure. Fame had wrapped itself around Perry like a storm cloud. Every move was public, every word analyzed. He once admitted that success made real love almost impossible, because everyone fell in love with the idea of Steve Perry, not the man behind the microphone. When their relationship ended, Perry was devastated. Sherry said years later that the breakup broke both our hearts, but she respected his need for space. He never publicly blamed her. He just stopped talking about her. Instead, he poured every ounce of that pain into music. Songs like "Foolish Heart" and "Missing You." Tracks that felt like open wounds disguised as love songs. After that, Perry built a wall. He retreated from the chaos of touring and focused on solitude. Decades passed before he would love again. Then, in 2011, something remarkable happened. Perry met Kelly Nash, a psychologist battling cancer. She wasn't from the music world. She didn't care about fame. Perry said he saw her in a documentary and knew instantly he had to meet her. When they finally did, he fell hard. For a moment, the guarded rock star became a teenager again, hopeful, open, unafraid to feel. But tragedy struck. Kelly's illness returned, and within a year, she was gone. Her death crushed him, but also awakened something he'd buried long ago. Perry later said Kelly made him promise not to hide anymore, to sing again, to live again. And that's exactly what he did. When Perry eventually re-emerged with Traces, his first album in nearly 25 years, every lyric dripped with loss, love, and gratitude. Yet even then, he never mentioned his rumored daughter. Only a promise kept to someone I'll always love. To fans, it sounded like a farewell to Kelly, but to others, it sounded like something more. A message to the family he'd kept hidden, and to the parts of himself he was finally ready to forgive. Leaks, clues, and the internet's obsession. By the time Steve Perry returned to the public eye, the world had changed. The internet had turned gossip into gospel, and every legend from the past was now living under a microscope. For a man as private as Perry, it was the perfect storm. Fans were desperate for answers, and the web was ready to fill in the blanks. Rumors about his hidden daughter resurfaced again and again, this time spreading across blogs, forums, and social media pages. A few fan sites claimed her name was Shamila Arnold, saying she lived a quiet life outside the spotlight. Some even claimed she had children of her own, making Steve Perry a grandfather. But each source led back to another, with no traceable origin, no confirmation, and no comment from Perry himself. And yet, that silence only made people more convinced. Because that's how myths work. They grow in the spaces where truth refuses to speak. Over the years, fans noticed something peculiar. In rare interviews, whenever someone brought up family, Perry's tone shifted. He'd get quiet, his eyes softened. Sometimes he would smile, then change the subject. Not with annoyance, but with a kind of sadness, as if protecting something sacred. That subtle behavior became a signature clue for devoted fans who read between the lines. They believed Perry wasn't hiding scandal. He was guarding love. Then came a wave of supposed leaks, blurry photos, unverified claims, and even fake social media profiles pretending to be his daughter. But Perry never took legal action, never issued a statement, never fed the story. It was as though he'd learned long ago that some truths didn't need defending. To him, silence wasn't avoidance, it was loyalty. Loyalty to a promise he might have made decades ago, to someone who didn't want fame, interviews, or attention. And while the world scrolled, speculated, and searched for answers, Perry seemed perfectly content letting them wonder. Because for a man who spent his life communicating through music, sometimes not saying a word is the loudest message of all. The emotional comeback that revealed everything without words. When Steve Perry finally returned, he didn't do it with noise, he did it with feeling. After nearly 25 years of silence, Perry walked back into the studio, not as the rock god he once was, but as a man who had lived through heartbreak, loss, and years of soul-searching. His 2018 album Traces wasn't designed to conquer charts. It was a confession in melody. Every lyric, every breath sounded like a letter never sent. The song spoke of distance, time, and a kind of love that never really fades. To fans, it was clearly about Kelly Nash, the woman who reignited his heart. But others heard something more, a longing that ran even deeper, a quiet message to someone who'd grown up far from the chaos of fame. And Perry's actions only deepened that interpretation. He didn't go on massive tours. He didn't chase spotlight interviews. Instead, he seemed content releasing music on his own terms. At peace, reflective, grounded. Almost as if he'd already found what he was searching for. Then came the project that stunned everyone. In 2024, Perry released an emotional duet with his late father, using old cassette recordings. He sang alongside a voice from the past, a man he'd lost decades earlier. Fans felt chills. It wasn't just a song, it was a conversation between generations. To some, that duet symbolized something bigger. Maybe it was his way of reconciling with family, his father, his own past, and perhaps even the part of himself that had remained hidden. It was Perry, the man who once disappeared into silence, now using music to heal everything silence couldn't. And as if to complete the circle, he began auctioning personal memorabilia, handwritten lyrics, studio notes, and keepsakes from his journey days. For a man who once guarded every part of his life, that gesture felt like release. He wasn't running anymore. He was remembering, forgiving, and letting go. Without ever saying a word about his rumored daughter, Steve Perry managed to tell the world everything we needed to know. That love doesn't always need to be public to be real, and that sometimes the quietest stories carry the loudest echoes. Maybe Steve Perry never meant for the world to know everything. Maybe the mystery was the point. What we do know is that his music still feels personal, because it was. Every lyric, every note, carries a piece of the man who lived between heartbreak and hope, and perhaps a love he chose to keep hidden forever. Some secrets aren't meant to be exposed, they're meant to be felt. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with another Journey fan, and subscribe to Backstage Melody, where the greatest legends live on, one untold story at a time.